What's going on, my friends? I've got a different kind of video for you today, something a bit simpler, but something I think is very important because I'm sure a lot of you have seen all of these sensational headlines in the media about this big recall. And I use the term recall in quotes like that because traditionally, when it comes to a recall through NHTSA, NHTSA, the National Highway and Traffic Administration, typically that is a physical recall that needs to be taken in and fixed by a dealer or, remedied in some way that requires a person to take their vehicle into a dealer or service center or whatever. And I've got an interesting graph here that I'll put up thanks to Stephen Mark Ryan from Solving the Money Problem, where he points out that since 2020, you can look at the recall listings that have been done. This is pretty nutty. So Ford since 2020 has had 100 recalls, 100 physical recalls, and the rest have had a lot to go with it, and none of them have had more than maybe one over-the-air update. It sort of begs the question as to where all of the sensational headlines are for having 100 recalls on a product. But then again, if you know what you're looking at, when it comes to the media and the fact that they get ad revenue from Legacy Auto, yeah, of course you're not going to see any sensational headlines around what's going wrong with the other companies. They've got deep pockets in ad revenue that the media gets to take advantage of, so there's actually a monetary incentive to protect them and no incentive at all to have any sort of integrity around Tesla. And honestly, you can't really blame the media entirely because it's become nothing but a shit show of sensationalism and getting clicks. It's basically reality TV with a CNN logo. And that's just the way it is. It sucks, and most people that actually know what's going on won't get their legitimate news from those sources. But unfortunately, there are those that see these headlines or it sticks in their head and they think, oh man, another Tesla autopilot crash that killed somebody. And when you look at it, no, autopilot wasn't involved at all. The example I'm referring to being the one in Texas where the two men died in the Model S in the neighborhood because they were drunk and everyone jumped on the autopilot bandwagon. Anyway, all the ranting aside, what I wanted to do was cut through the BS, as I love to do. If you followed me for a while, you know that I value the objective truth and the actual science behind things versus the hyperbolic praise or sensationalism that comes in the media. So what we're going to do is actually go ahead and look at this recall. And I'll put it up on the screen for you so you can see it with me, and feel free to pause and read as you need to. So the media has been labeling this as Tesla recalls over 370,000 something vehicles because they're crashing into people or because there's a chance that they're going to kill people. They're sensationalizing it like crazy. Well, let's look at the actual verbiage. So the top portion, the first two pages are basically just going into the vehicles that are affected, and it's basically any vehicle with FSD capability. But if we actually get down to the meat and bones of it, we look right here. We got description of the defect. FSD Beta is a level 2 system support feature that can provide steering and braking acceleration support to the driver under certain operating limitations. With FSD Beta, as with all level 2 driver support features, the driver is responsible for operation of the vehicle. That's important. We're responsible. We take liability. It's on us. This is why I combat people in the comments all the time that are saying that I'm breaking all these rules or whatever by using FSD with Uber, Lyft, or, yeah, that aside. It's right here with this NHTSA documentation that it's on us as owners. Anyway, back to the goodies. The driver is responsible for operation of the vehicle whenever the feature is engaged and must constantly supervise the feature and intervene. Example, steer, brake, or accelerate as needed to maintain safe operation of the vehicle. Now, here is the crux of the recall, or the over-the-air update to be coming soon. In certain rare circumstances, not all the time, not expected to happen every 5 minutes, and within the operational limits of FSD Beta, when the feature is engaged, the feature could potentially infringe upon local traffic laws or customs while executing certain driving maneuvers in the following conditions, before some drivers may be able to intervene. Now, that's an important part. A driver that is paying attention, knows the system well, like I do, drives these roads all the time. I can name certain areas, like the Hotel Circle Roundabout, where I know it's going to go too fast, or when you get off the highway there on the Friars Challenge and the speed limit is too high, which we'll get to again. I can tap on the little icon to reset it. A good, attentive tester that understands the system knows where these areas are. Sure, there may be edge cases where something might throw you off, but then you take note of it, you take over, you remember it for next time. There's a perceived risk as far as to say that somebody might slip up. Yes. But do we really want to go there when we're talking about humans behind the wheel of a vehicle? Anyways, let's continue. All right, getting to the conditions referred to. Number 1, traveling or turning through certain intersections during a stale yellow traffic light, which can be it's weird verbiage for such an official document, but imagine yourself, and I am going to provide a couple of examples of this after this more boring part, so bear with me. I'll show you at least 2 examples I know of that are in here, not really including the traffic light one because that is very situational, but I know that most of you, if you think about it, will be able to relate. This has to do with, you say you need to turn left at a light that does not have a designated turn signal. So you're at a 4-way intersection for simplicity, and you've got greens on both sides, but you need to turn left. You have a turn lane, but you don't have a designated signal, so you have to wait for an opportunity. Well, there's not an opportunity until you see a yellow light, but you are already in the middle of the intersection. You know that the second that last car passes, as is going to happen as things are coming to a red light, you get out of there. You accelerate, get out of the intersection to avoid potential issues. And this is a normal occurrence that happens with humans, especially in very densely populated areas where people are trying to get through these lights versus being stuck at the light repeatedly. Now, this is why the verbiage in here mentions traffic customs as well as laws, because it's what you would normally expect culturally for people to do when driving to maintain safe and efficient operations. These are important perspectives to maintain when actually going through this document. Now, when it comes to this example for number 1, the traveling through a static yellow light or a stale yellow light, that would have to do with likely a situation where the vehicle would then be stuck in a red light scenario and stay there in the intersection. And if the person wasn't smart enough to take over, you've now blocked traffic. So as a custom, you hit the throttle or you fully disengage, take over, and get through. I'm sure plenty of the now 400,000 plus beta testers have been through this scenario, and most of you who don't even own a Tesla and just drive have gone through this sort of thing plenty of times. So that's number 1. Moving on to number 2, we have the perceived duration of the vehicle's static position at certain intersections with a stop sign, particularly when the intersection is clear of any other road users. This is kind of interesting because this, number 2, is clearly defining a scene where you're the only one at a 4-way intersection or at an intersection involving a stop sign, period. And what it's referring to is how long the vehicle may linger. And if you've seen me for a while, especially watching the Friars Challenge videos, I've commented how on certain 4-way stops, especially the staging area of the Friars Challenge, where we have a couple of those intersections, I've mentioned the issue with the system taking too long to get going, to get moving, to take that initiative, but it's gotten better. To add to this point, you do have somebody behind you, because if there's no one behind you, then this portion of the text in this described defect wouldn't make any sense. So you're at a 4-way intersection with no obstacles or anyone around you except the person behind you that you could potentially be holding up. Now, in this portion of the text, that person behind you could end up being impatient or held back because for whatever reason, the system is not executing in a timely manner to move, to get out of the way. And that is where anybody who knows how that behavior is just simply hits the throttle and we're good. We're taking off. Everything is fine. So similar to number 1, this is very situational and very easy to avoid if you're just halfway competent and paying attention, which is the key crux to everything. Pay attention. Be ready. Know what your system will do and won't do. I have said countless times, don't be that person that needlessly holds up other people and you're being an inconvenience. Keep that etiquette in mind. So going on to number 3, adjusting vehicle speed while traveling through certain variable speed zones based on detected speed limit signage and or the vehicle's speed offset setting that is adjusted by the driver. So this is going to get probably a little annoying for some people. Myself, I only have my offset at 10%. That's not a lot. That's a couple of miles per hour or a couple of kilometers per hour over. That's not 10 over, that's 10%. If it's a 20 mile an hour speed limit, my car might be going 24, 25. It's probably not even, like 22 to 24. It's a very small amount for me. But there are some people that like to set their car to 10 over, or as I've heard the number 20% over, and will likely have that restriction affected with the FSD active, which is fine. I don't care. I mean, we shouldn't be racing around. It's like the people that are complaining about their system won't go up to 90 miles an hour. Relax. You shouldn't have to go 90 miles an hour on the highway anyway. If you're on autopilot, just chill, throw on an audiobook in the background and just supervise the vehicle. We'll likely see some change to our permissions for speed offset. Now, when you're talking about the speed changing variability, that's a little bit tougher because that's not exactly Tesla's fault. That is also, and I could be wrong, please correct me if I am. I do not mind correction. I applaud it because I want to be less wrong. That aside, when it comes to speed limit recognition, I'm looking at this 15 mile an hour speed limit sign right in front of us here. And my system does a really good job of acknowledging a lot of these things and changing, but there is a case that I'll show you after this on the Friars Challenge where you're coming off the highway and sometimes it still reads that as a 65-mile-an-hour road, or in my case 115 kilometers an hour, when it should be around 72k or closer to about 40 miles an hour. And it's not always done that. Sometimes it's correct, sometimes it's not. Regardless, I know about it, and I either tap the icon to reset it, or I just take over, or flick down on the scroll wheel, which brings your speed back down. There are so many ways to mitigate that, and most people do. But again, with the first two as well, this is a perceived possibility of a potential for something to possibly happen if you're not paying attention. The language and verbiage, the verbiage in this is very vague on purpose, and that's what'll make it, I think, a bit more difficult for Tesla to address this in its software update. But before we get to that, we'll get to the final part, which is something that if you take a second to think about, you'll all be able to relate to as well, which is negotiating a lane change out of a turn-only scenario and continue traveling straight. I said that a little bit differently than it's typed out because it's typed kind of weird. The actual verbiage is negotiating a lane change out of certain turn-only lanes to continue traveling straight. Or basically, you're on a road that you weren't expecting to become a turn lane, which has happened if you're driving somewhere you're not used to. Or you're using the system and it doesn't perceive the difference between a turn-only lane and a straight lane at stop signs. I know of two scenarios like that in the North Park area near Bluefoot that I'll show you. One area actually on the Friars Challenge, or not on the Friars Challenge, but in the Friars area going the other way where the roads get really weird and the system hasn't messed it up yet, or in a while I should say, but there has been some confusion in the past. And I just take a second and think about this. How many times have you ended up in a lane that's turn only and you go, damn, I need to be in the other lane? And you'll do several things. Some people will turn their turn signal on or put their hand out and wave like, I'm sorry, can I get out? I've been in situations where the person next to me's window's been down, I've lowered mine, I said, I am really sorry, I goofed. Is there any way I could get in front of you to continue on? And the person's been very nice to let me do so. Technically, that is not a proper maneuver. Now, the beta can't ask someone permission to do this, and regardless of whether or not there's somebody next to you, behind you, or not, I have been in scenarios where it will continue on straight, and if there's no one around me, I'm going to let it, because I'm going to do the same thing as a human. I'm not going to turn right, you turn around, get back out of there. That's just not what we do, and it has to do, again, with the verbiage around traffic customs, which is separate from laws. So, again, this whole thing is pretty vague, but that's it. That's literally, those are the only 4 points that NHTSA is calling out against Tesla, and as far as the safety risk portion below, it is described as such. In the specific and rare circumstances described above, again, the verbiage is very clear. In the specific and rare circumstances described above, when a Tesla vehicle is operating with a software version of FSD Beta as described below, and with FSD Beta engaged, certain driving maneuvers could potentially infringe upon local traffic laws or customs, which could increase the risk of a collision if the driver does not intervene. And that, put in very layman's terms, means the beta may goof and cause a confusing scenario where there could potentially be an accident. Take a second and realize how often it is that the humans all around you do this very same thing. Now, I am not committing an equivocation fallacy here. All I'm saying is that perspective is important. It is important that we do critique and judge the system at a high standard. I'm simply equating that we do not set a very high standard, as has been alluded to by Elon and Tesla and plenty of other people and myself. I have no shame in calling out how dumb it is that all these silly apes 2 chromosomes away from a chimpanzee are driving these multi-ton vehicles around at high speeds with no regard for one another. So, yeah, I find it entertaining and comical in a very ironic way that there is so much charged sensationalism around this recall, again, this over-the-air update that'll come, that the media will just jump on it and run with it to the moon and back, just trying to get anything they can out of it. Now, this does present a unique challenge for Tesla, because these aren't clear black and white problems that they can just fix. This is a part of complicated driving, of interacting in the real world with real world scenarios around other people. So what I'm expecting to happen after reading this to further protect not only Tesla as a company, but the drivers with the system and other people on the road, what is likely going to happen is a few things. One I've already alluded to, which is probably restricting further our offset privileges when it comes to speed limit and what we deem as being okay, even if it's not exactly legal. This was seen already with the big fuss raised around the whole rolling stop thing. That is just another example of a double standard. But hey, it is what it is. Again, with that and this as a voluntary recall, Tesla is taking responsibility and going ahead to mitigate this in a way that'll keep them in the right, which is the good thing to do. You know, there's always going to be somebody to complain. We went through that whole ordeal with the head of NHTSA being the very clearly anti-Tesla individual that I can't remember the name of this person right now, but I'm sure you can look her up. I don't really care to reignite all that. I'm not even sure if she's still the head of NHTSA, but be that as it may, with the plenty of actors that are in place to try to target this system, Tesla's doing the right thing to try to mitigate this, and as well as likely changing our privilege to offset the speed limit. I'm expecting more preemptive warnings when the system is coming into a scenario where they know, due to map data or whatever, that this road is going to turn into a turn only, or that the speed limit might be changing going into a residential area, because speed limit's vary like crazy. It could be 35, 25, 15, 10, all kinds of speed limit variables. So I imagine that there's going to be more warnings for us, more visible text or chimes that say, hey, get ready just in case, make sure you're paying attention, because that is the crux of it, that we are ready to intervene. That is in the very text of the recall that you saw. So again, this is not some big splash problem. This is not a massive safety concern because cars are crashing and you name sensationalism here or there. This is simply a perceived risk of a potential occurrence on rare circumstances where a driver might not intervene in time. And it's valid. I'm not saying it's invalid. It just seems a bit extra, if you ask me. As far as solving the problems themselves, that's going to come with iteration through the system, because timing those yellow lights right to make that turn as it's changing and knowing when to not be in a turn lane, as well as the speed limit adjustments, which I think is kind of shared between maps data from Google and Tesla's recognition. So that's kind of a shared concern. But all these parts are sort of the iterative process of becoming better as a system. That's why I think what we're going to see in an update, if it doesn't completely cancel the ability to do those certain things, which I hope not, that would set back and limit the amount of data that could be collected to iterate and improve those scenarios. I think rather than that, we're just going to get more warnings, more verbal messages that say, hey, be ready. This is on you. Do what you got to do to prevent potential problems. And I think it's on us as testers to just know and spread that message. Those of us who've been doing this for a while. I've not been on here as long as Dirty Tesla and Chuck Cook and Whole Mars and Tesla owner Silicon Valley. A lot of these people have been around for a while, but I've done this enough and long enough to tell you all the same thing that they should be telling you too, which is be ready to take over. Take over often, be smart, stay attentive, looking around, expect problems, and then you'll never be surprised. So with that, let's go ahead and look at the two scenarios real quick, and then I'm going to let you all go. All right, so here I'll go ahead and put the FSD Beta on, and I'm actually glad that we're getting into the far right lane, because this will demonstrate the need to change lanes out of a lane that is going to become a right turn only, and in a rather exaggerated way, because up here it stays a two-lane road even as it widens out, and we'll see how the system handles it. We got a car right next to us. We're going kind of fast, so this is an example. We're slowing down. We're going to need to carry straight. The car next to us looked like they wanted to go left, so here it is. So I'm going to take over. Nobody's behind us. This is on me. I'm driving. But this is an example. Because that car stayed right next to us, we weren't going to be able to get over, and the system didn't know ahead of time that that was going to become a right turn only, and we needed to carry along straight. But, again, I know that. I take over, everything is fine. That's really dumb. And we carry on, you know, but it is there. You know, the system can do that, and that is why there is the verbiage in the user agreement to be prepared, to be ready to take over, and why anybody who knows what they're doing is going to encourage you to take over often. So we'll go into the last example that I know of, closer to the North Park area, to show you the lane change thing, and we'll carry on. So here's an example where we don't have really anybody. Okay, he's actually waving us through, and the beta took advantage of it, which is really good. Thank you, man. He doesn't even know that our car was self-driving. That was actually really good execution, and now the system's gotten really good at leaving stop signs in a much more timely manner. Here's the example, guys. There it is. We did it. Okay, we have the incorrect speed. So it's not, there it goes, it registered and it changed. I actually tapped it before it even registered the change, but the second it did, the system reacted. When it changed to 64, that was fine. And that is why I think that is not as much on Tesla's, that's why I think that's not as much Tesla's fault as it is a shared responsibility with the maps and planning, as well as speed limit recognition. During again, like the verbiage in the actual recall that we went over said, rare circumstances. And ultimately, it's not a massive concern, especially if, to say it for the millionth time today, you're paying attention and know what you're doing. I honestly think that if this is really hard for you, you shouldn't be a part of the FSD beta. I don't care if you've paid for it or not. But again, let's go ahead and get to that last example. I'm glad we were able to catch that before we left the area. But we got one more to show you all. I appreciate you hanging in there with me to go over this. I think it's very important. Alrighty guys, we are on a course that'll take us right through the stop that I'm talking about, which is right here at this four-way intersection. And hopefully it actually does it incorrectly for the sake of learning today and doesn't behave because I'm calling it out, which is just the irony of life sometimes. But what I was actually just thinking back there with that red light, it was not a no turn on red scenario, but that is one of the bullets that I probably would have put in that potential recall notice. If you're going to call out these other four things, that one actually makes sense, that if you're not paying attention, the car will break the law and do a right on red when you're not supposed to. Again, it's the driver's responsibility to realize that it's a no turn on red, and yeah, humans break that law all the time, and I've even been honked at because I'm not doing it. I've almost gotten out of my car and pointed at the sign like, hey, genius, read. But that is to say that of the things that they're complaining about, kind of missed an opportunity to point out something that is a bit more sensible and a lot clearer to understand. It's very direct, black and white. There isn't like this perceived potentiality to it. But whatever, you know, again, it's something that if you know what you're doing, you know how to avoid it. And I mean, these four-way stops with nothing around us, it is executing. Like, this version of FSD Beta has been a substantial improvement on the amount of time it takes to leave a stop sign, in my experience. I understand it's different car to car and place to place, so I'm not speaking universally for everybody, but in my observation, with what I've seen on the roads that I drive, it has made a rather impressive improvement. There's also, you know, another point that could have been brought up. You know, if you know the system well, this maneuver coming up here where we go left, that is now a roundabout. And it wasn't before. It's still not reflected properly on this map. It just shows to turn left. The system knows vision first to execute this roundabout, but it is wonky because this is weird and kind of like, it almost looks temporary with the way it's constructed. And I know how to properly go through this, to wait. I'm giving it throttle now to get us through here. And if I need to, I will continue giving it throttle or take over as necessary to prevent people from being held up by it. And again, that is my responsibility. It is on me, the person who is using this and understands it. I will hammer that point home until your ears are bleeding and you just want me to shut up, because that's how important it is. This is all kind of new, so the system's being very edgy around it with all these new cones and bike lane stuff. And again, knowing the system as well as I do, because I've been on these roads a bunch of times before this was here, you learn these things about it. You understand its limitations. You, contrary to what some believe, don't need to be an expert in programming neural nets to use the FSD Beta responsibly. I've already had that conversation to exhaustive amounts. All right, now this is it here. It's one of the next two. It actually might not be this one, but maybe. So one part of it is a turn lane and the other part is straight. So no, it's the next one. The next one actually has a designated turn lane. So we'll get through this stop sign, and the next one you'll see, and in my experience, most of the time, the car gets into the turning lane one for some reason, instead of staying to the left to not turn, which is frustrating. But what it'll do is it knows it needs to go straight. So it'll get into this right turn lane, which we're already inching over, which is interesting. And then it'll correct itself and go straight down that road. Now, to avoid any potentiality with people complaining, oh, look at that, it corrected itself today. Amazing. But plenty of times it's been in that lane and then continued on straight, realizing it's made a mistake. Now, I don't remember if the last time I did that was before 25.2, if it's since been fixed, but it is kind of ironic that it's doing so well today with so many things to show you, like, yes, it's a rare circumstance to the verbiage of the recall. And even if it was going to do it, I was going to take over just to avoid people complaining, see, FSD Beta did it. No, I did. Because that's the point of all of this. Regardless of the beta doing it or me doing it, it's the same fault. It's on me. So I won't hammer that home anymore. I really appreciate you guys hanging in for this video. It's a bit longer than I expected, but it's covering a very important topic that I think people need to understand with the way the media blows things out of proportion and tries to sensationalize everything related to Tesla or Elon Musk. And your opinions aside, this is the fact, or these are the facts, sorry. And I think it's a really good idea to like and share this. I don't ask for that much, but please share this video with everybody that you can to spread the facts and some actual examples of what's going on. I know some great people have already covered this. Rob Maurer with Tesla Daily, Stephen Mark Ryan with Solving the Money Problem. Two of my favorites, and I'm certain Ryan McCaffrey's covered it on the podcast already, Ride the Lightning. So I am just trying to join the ranks and going over what this is all about. So thanks again so much, everybody, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.